the AFC 2022 AFC South. We're going to take a very quick look at NFL talking points that we discussed in previous videos, and then we're going to get right into discussing the four teams in the AFC South, their schedule analysis, and the way we're looking at those teams. Ron, what are your talking points? Quickly review those, please.
Okay, the visuals on the screen, the roster before, the analysis of the free agency, draft, schedule analysis report. This takes place between February and the end of April, or actually middle of May with the schedule now. All we're doing is looking for edges. We're deciding based on all these talking points, when should we act, if we should act in terms of season wins, divisional futures, and so on. All these are pieces of the puzzle. We're networking with each other, we're reading, we're writing, we're doing all these different things to determine whether or not we should play season wins, how we're going to attack the season, not waiting for the season to start, but jotting down notes right now, shopping between sports books and lines and offshore establishments and so on to get the best prices we can, and just basically using these videos to crystallize our thoughts. And I think we've done a great job over the spring in terms of bringing up different topics, Pythagorean theorem, all the way through the draft analysis, schedule analysis. And that's where we stand right now, Chris.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remind people that, hurry up and wait is not a bad strategy. A lot of what we're doing is just gathering information, rehashing it, and going over it. And there's no need to immediately act on anything. I think it's much better to leave a good play on the table than to quickly act and make a bad play. So I think we're both in agreement on that. As far as this division goes, it's been a roller coaster. Let's start with those Indianapolis Colts. The opinion was that they were going to go down the rabbit hole, and somehow they made a lot of moves in the offseason, and now they've gone from a team that was going to be left for dead after last season to a team that is favored to win their division at this point. I believe this is going to be the 8th year in a row that they have a new starting quarterback to start the season. Is that correct, Ron?
I'm going to trust you on that one, but I know it's been a lot since the Andrew Luck time, so definitely
7 or 8 years in a row with a new quarterback. What's your outlook on this team?
Well, this is one of those roller coaster rides, but it's not one of those roller coasters where you close your eyes, that there are huge dips back and forth. It's just I've been a little bit leaning one way and a little bit leaning another way, and I'm kind of in the middle of this now. So we go back when they ended the season, they hated Wentz. They basically thought that Wentz quit on the team with his off-field and on-field performances, and they couldn't wait to get rid of him. They lucked into a very sweet trade as far as giving up not that much for Matt Ryan, who's probably an upgrade, and certainly an upgrade in terms of leadership, but Wentz still cost them the number 1 pick. So therefore, we didn't get a lot of draft capital from Indianapolis. What's interesting to me, Chris, is that they changed defensive coordinators. Now, it wasn't their choice they changed, but they changed because their former defensive coordinator got a head coaching job. But this is something I'm going to be watching very carefully in August. We're talking August instead of acting right now, because what I didn't like about Indianapolis the last 7, 8, 9 years, even during the Andrew Luck time, is how passive they played their pass defense. Even with Darius Leonard, even with a couple of other guys up front, they were comfortable allowing teams completing 2 out of every 3 passes, and in 1 year, 70% of the passes. And that's just a recipe for always having a chance to lose a game in the fourth quarter. They've added Stephen Gilmore, and 15 minutes ago, literally 15 minutes ago, Chris, I read where he loves what he's seeing about the Indianapolis new defensive scheme and how he fits right into that. So my work on this team is not done. They have an easier schedule as compared to their rival Tennessee. In fact, they have the easiest AFC schedule, in my opinion, based on my preset power ratings, not based on what happened last year or wins by any teams but my power ratings. And therefore, they have a lot of stuff going in that's very favorable. But I really need to see how the scheme works early in August, at least in the preseason, and what's going on, what the buzz is. So I have no opinion on future plays or week-by-week plays right now, and I'll look to you to see what you have to add to that.
I'm cautiously optimistic on them. I think it's really interesting that they start off, I believe, 5 out of the first 6 weeks with divisional games. So that's very unique. They get the late season bye, I believe, in week 14, and then they've got a manageable finish with their remaining games. So they're positioned, differently than last year. Their schedule was brutal last year. They were decimated with the injuries, the quarterback controversy. As a Colts bettor that I really enjoyed betting, it was disappointing. They just seemed to get the short end of the stick everywhere they went. I think that this could be a complete rejuvenation process with Matt Ryan in the fold there. Everything coming out so far, as you referenced, seems to be positive, and I do like the coaching there. So I'm cautiously optimistic on this division. I believe that they still have a lot of great parts, even with the subtractions that they had in the offseason. But, that's where I'm going to be. I'm cautiously optimistic. I believe that they are the best team in this division. But I think that the other team, I believe that there's going to be I think the 2 bottom feeders are going to be a little bit better. Which may throw a little monkey wrench into it. I skipped over Houston. Moving on to Houston,
I want to ask you one question before we move on. In terms of winning the division, which I don't have the odds in front of me, but it's probably roughly flat. Like, let's say it's plus 100 or minus 110 or whatever. Do you feel there's any value in the divisional future?
I'm looking that up live. What the divisional odds are. Is it that short, even money?
Yeah. That's off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me either.
Circa's got it at minus 125. So
okay. So basically what we're saying is 55%, 56% to win the division to break even. So if you want to, everything we do is about return on investment, ROI. Every video we should ever be doing regarding gambling is that. Do you think they have an over 60% chance to win the division, which is what's necessary to create an edge?
I do. I mean, I really do. It's probably, when you're looking at, there's just so many things that can go wrong throughout the course of the season. I really generally don't have a history of taking preseason positions on stuff. So, I'm very focused on the week to week, and that's where all my attention and larger wagers are going to be involved. So when I'm looking ahead at this type of stuff, it's tempting. I don't know. I don't know how they lose this division. I really don't. I mean, unless they get, if Ryan's a disaster and they get hit with some injuries, Tennessee is good enough to do that. It just doesn't seem like there's value on it, though.
Yeah. It's a talking point. I just wanted to throw that out.
No, and that's why we do these videos, is we talk stuff out and we're looking at different perspectives. I just don't see an overwhelming value there because Tennessee is going to be lurking in the background. Even though I don't think that they're going to be as good as last year. Going back to moving on to Houston, I don't have a lot to say about Houston. I know that they have approximately a 50% turnover, which scares the bejesus out of me, with that, integrating that type of turnover. There are no expectations on this team whatsoever. The season win total opened higher, and it's already down to 4.5 under minus 135. Do you see any optimism with this team, Ron?
Well, historically, a terrible drafting team that can't wait to get rid of picks instead of building for the future. They have company in this division, but the issue here is they underwent 60% roster turnover just a year ago. Now they've got 50% more roster turnover. They got Lovie Smith back, seems like another placeholder. And he's going to wear two hats, which scares me. He's going to be the defensive coordinator and the head coach. So how are they going to integrate all this, even though a lot of their free agent pickups are veterans, so they don't have to be handheld? The chemistry is just not going to be there. There's tape on Davis Mills, the quarterback.
I have a question. I had a really low opinion of Lovie Smith. Maybe it's because of how poorly he did in college. But I had some conversations with some people, and I look back, and he actually doesn't have a bad NFL record win-wise. He did okay. It's been a while since he's coached in the NFL. But what are your thoughts on his ability to actually still, connect and have any success whatsoever after what I consider, college was a disaster, wasn't it?
College was an absolute disaster. He integrated NFL concepts into college and it failed miserably. His very soft zone schemes wouldn't work in college, and they're not going to work in the NFL. My biggest problem with him is not what he was in the past, which was an average coach, no problem. But what he is now. Is he a Jeff Fisher? Is he a John Fox? Dinosaurs who couldn't adapt to the changing NFL? Or is he going to be an Andy Reid who completely changed his stripes, figured out ahead of schedule that you needed speed to contend, changed his schemes, changed everything? And to me, Lovie Smith is going to be more like Fox, and he's going to be more like, what the Rams had in Jeff Fisher, and the game will have passed him by a little bit.
I don't think they're in a disaster quarterback position. Do you? I think there's some potential there.
There's potential because he has one of the traits I love, and that's accuracy. But there is game tape on him, and so teams are going to adjust. The good thing for Houston is they don't get everybody's best shot, because that puts them live in a few different games. But they're probably going to be an underdog. What would you say? 15 out of 17 games on their schedule, even though it's a fourth place schedule.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm also curious, what's the veteran turnover? You know what? They had a lot of veterans on that team last year. Did they dump a lot of those? Are they all gone? Are they holding on to a lot of veterans?
1-year contracts. That's what they did last year. That's what they're doing this year. 1-year contracts. It's half prove-it contracts. These are not superstars they're adding, but they have been starters in the past, or at least rotational guys. So they've added talented people, but not people that are going to drive, the win needle, not people that are going to become all pros. It's almost like a no-name defense. Who's their star on defense?
I've got a sneaky feeling, and I don't know why. I just have a sneaky feeling, as you inferred, they're not going to get the best games out of their opposing teams. I have a feeling that they're going to sneak up on teams. I have a feeling that they're going to be play on week to week against the spread. I think they're going to be a little bit undervalued. I just have a funny feeling with all those veterans, a decent quarterback, and no expectations whatsoever. I have a feeling you're going to see this team show up occasionally, more often than people expect. Can you see that out of this team?
Let me throw a curveball at you, little baseball term. What about looking at team totals during the season? Lovie Smith's a defensive-minded coach. Their offense has a very young quarterback, one wide receiver of note in Brandon Cooks. Their offensive line is a work in progress. Nobody knows who their running backs are. I mean, they didn't have any last year. What are the chances Lovie Smith is going to play the soft defense, make teams go down the field, not do anything innovative on offense? Are we looking at unders? Are we looking at Houston under their team totals, regardless of the competitiveness on a week-by-week basis?
Well, you can't see anything exciting offensively, but we're just trying to get serviceable offense out of this team is the expectation. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I just want to throw this out to anybody who listens to this or watches this, is that we're looking for something different than the norm. If we think Houston's going to lose 13, 14 games, well, everybody thinks they're going to lose that many games. So there's not going to be an edge there. There may be times that they're completely overmatched. I'll be looking for that. We may be able to ride some losing streaks with them. But basically, what are some of the other things that might come into play? And it's a defensive-minded team, or a defensive-minded coaching staff, and I think they're going to play it really cautious offensively.
And that's why it's a lot better to keep up with the NFL than catch up with the NFL, because I think by the end of this summer, we're going to be digging deeper into the different derivatives that are going to be available to take advantage of, assets and liabilities of each of these teams. It's a great point, Ron. Jacksonville. My opinion on Jacksonville, boy, they hit a free agent bonanza, spent a lot of money. They did okay in the draft. They got rid of this. I basically see this as 2 years of a team combining for their first year, because the coaching was so atrocious last year. I don't believe that the players played for Meyer. I think he alienated everybody out of the gate. I think that the injuries hurt him badly. I don't believe there was proper coaching for these people. So you basically have 2 years of draftees. They're going to actually get some decent coaching out of the gate. And I think the expectations are going to be a little bit high, so to speak. But I see room for optimism. How high can they go, though, Ron?
I'm looking at the scroll right now. Their season win total is 6.5. Incredibly, their season win total was higher last year because of Urban Meyer. And I have a lot of people to thank for that, because it was a tremendous value. You can't insert a dictatorial college coach into an NFL environment. So what's he worth not being in the locker room? Is he worth 4, 5, 6 wins? He may very well be. And they overspent. We know they overspent for Jacksonville. And I just finished my NFL draft analysis on them. And some of my closing words were, hey, they needed to overspend, because it's hard to attract people to Jacksonville, especially with the culture that they're coming off of. How do you get people to do that? So you pay Christian Kirk, I don't know, 70% more than he's worth, but he's still their best wide receiver. So they've upgraded their roster. They took a colossal chance with the number 1 draft pick in Walker, because he has a year's worth of experience. It's unheard of for a number 1 draft overall pick to do that. And the one thing this organization has just let me down time and time again in terms of how I write about them is, how do you turn a deep draft from 12 picks into 7? They started the draft with 12. They ended up with 7. They still need a whole bunch of talent on the team. Basically, their GM said, hey, we don't think the draft is that deep after round 5. And I don't know what planet he's from, right, but I completely disagree with that. So Jacksonville's in a soft division. I mean, Indy has flaws. Tennessee has flaws. We know Houston has flaws. We know they have an offensive-minded head coach. So I'm going to throw this to you, Chris. I'm going to flip my script from Houston to Jacksonville, not look at the season win totals, but look at higher scoring games, because they have supposedly in Doug Peterson, a quarterback guru in terms of a head coach. They're going to get a lot more offense out of this team. Trevor Lawrence is going to be in year number 2. They're still going to have defensive flaws. Why not, preface my thinking right now as of June as saying we're going to see some higher scoring games out of this team.
What's going to be, I think, is going to be a pleasure is that they will not be that same boring team. We had offensive expectations from them last year, but, with the additions, they're going to be able to score. They're going to absolutely be able to score, and that's going to make their games more interesting and keep them, if they're not winning games, they're going to at least be able to backdoor cover and be involved in the point spread a lot more often. And it's going to make them a more interesting option week to week. As you kind of inferred, their defense is still going to have, its problems. So there's no quick fix there. So it should be a lot more interesting. I like that. I like how you brought that up, and it's definitely I'm tongue-tied. I'm actually excited because their games will actually be more interesting this year.
I think we're brainstorming on the spot, and it's very helpful to do that. I mean, they still have the tough road schedule. They still have one of their home games taken away because they're in London. So they have 7 home games out of 17. 10 times they're not at home. It's an uphill climb. So we're looking at other ways of delving into Jacksonville.
And this is an unusual year because the draft was so deep and because there was a lot of free agency. There's just more optimism throughout the entire league. I mean, there's not too many teams that everybody's dumping on. There are certainly more teams that people are optimistic on, and that's what makes this an unusual year. And that's why you have to dive into these teams a little bit more carefully, because some teams aren't going to be as improved as you think they are.
Okay, so final point on that note before you start on Tennessee, and that's Indianapolis signed 7 players after the draft that I deemed draft worthy. So that absolutely puts an exclamation point on what you said, and something
Exactly.
I didn't bring up because there's so many points we could bring up in a short period of time. But that's 7 other people that could help their roster, and that's the unusual nature of this draft.
Yeah, and there's other teams in that exact same situation that are as excited about their post-draft signings as they are the people that they picked up, within reason, of course. Tennessee, I'm going to lead off Tennessee because I'm going to give a stat that people are going to just scoff at. All last year, Tennessee did not make my top 10 ratings statistically the entire year. Not one single week did they appear as a top 10 team in my ratings. And anybody unfamiliar with me thinks I'm some Looney Tune guy. I actually do pretty well betting football week to week. So
I would say so.
So for them not to be in the top 10 is saying something, because there were people that had them number 1 last year at some point. But my metrics go deep in, and they, in my eyes, were kind of a glamour team. They had the glamour positions all covered, but they didn't do anything else well. I mean, they were atrocious in so many other aspects of the game. And now you can just look at this team coming in and you can see they've lost some of these glamour people. I don't think it was a horrible move to move Brown and start worrying about what your salary cap's going to look like. That's a smart move. You drafted a receiver that can step in, but I can't be that optimistic on this team. They seem to have lost some depth. I don't think that they were as good as people, the optics showed that they were last year. And I just don't see them being what they were. And even this general feeling around the betting atmosphere or the prediction atmosphere is that they won't be either. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think circumstances and coaching got them to the record that they had last year. I mean, Vrabel is a very good coach. He understands the rules, so he manipulates the rules late in games to his favor, kind of as a Belichick disciple. He's ahead of the game in terms of using the rules. We've discussed this. We discussed this in the playoffs last year. There were 14 teams in the playoffs. I think Tennessee was my 10th or 11th high power-rated team at that point. So at no point did I think that they were among the top 5, 6, 7 teams, or even among the top 3 in the AFC. Home field advantage helped a little bit, but you see what that got them. That got them a quick trip out of the playoffs with 3 interceptions by Tannehill. You mentioned that they lost their top wide receiver, salary maneuver. All teams are going to face that. We know wide receiver salaries skyrocketed this offseason. So this is the tip of the iceberg. Every year, the Tyreek Hills and the Browns are going to find new teams because wide receivers shouldn't be worth that much. They're one of 3 wide receivers on the field at any given time. Tennessee basically restocked its roster. They lost a guy, they got a guy. They lost a guy, they got a guy. This is not a different team from one year to the next. Indianapolis has a softer schedule. We've discussed that. There's a 4-game stretch where Tennessee plays a brutal assortment of quarterbacks. If I can read that, that's Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, week to week to week to week. That's brutal. And Indianapolis has double revenge against Tennessee. I mean, that's the team that they have to beat out. And Indianapolis has double revenge. You mentioned earlier when we talked about Indianapolis, how all their division games are stacked early in the year. So revenge is going to be fresh on their minds in September and October when they play these teams. So it's going to have to be coaching that carries them through. Where I am right now, I'm nowhere on them right now. They have playing Jacksonville twice and Houston twice means they can certainly make the playoffs. I agree with you. I have Indy slightly ahead of Tennessee in terms of making the playoffs, although I need to see things about Indianapolis' defensive scheme and so on. But I don't think Tennessee has changed much from last year to this year. And I just have to figure out how I can use that information. And right now I haven't figured that out.
Well, and that's the point is, yeah, they haven't changed much, but there's improvement all around them.
Yeah.
So they're surrounded by three teams that should be better. And last year, Tennessee just seemed to get teams at the right time. It was uncanny. It was the Colts were decimated when they played them. It just seemed like they did have this stretch where they beat all these great teams, and they looked like a powerhouse. But it was just smoke and mirrors some way somehow. But to your point, I just see them being about the same as last year, and with three other teams in the division improving, that's going to make it a little tougher on them.
And we're going to get to the AFC West next, and we know that division is murder, by far the best division, and all four of those teams have improved in one way, shape, or form. Buffalo's not going anywhere. Baltimore is going to be much better based on their injuries, or based on at least what I think they're going to be. Yeah. So that's the driving home. Maybe Tennessee's the same, but everybody else got better.
I can't strongly enough suggest downloading Ron's schedule analysis at the link scrolling at the bottom. It's just a must look at. It's nice to have handy, quick reference. We're going to be back with the AFC West whenever we can get some time on our hands to address that. So we appreciate everybody's time. Ron, great contribution. Sorry I got tongue-tied a little bit today, but I'm hungry. I want to go eat. So
okay, we're going to let you go eat, and we're going to put the discussion on hold for a little bit, and looking for more videos soon. Thanks a lot, Chris. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. Bye-bye.